What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Boys Do Sports. Today we got Week 8 start and sit episode. We'll talk about our starts, some sleeper starts for them guys that are down bad, some sits. Then we'll go through our favorite defenses of the week. Let's get started in our starts. We got Bo Nix at quarterback. He's coming off of a 40-point week against the Giants and will continue his reign against the Cowboys, who allow the most fantasy points per game to quarterbacks. He has 3 rushing touchdowns this season and has passed for 275 plus yards twice in similar matchups. If the game turns into a shootout like it should, Bo Nix has overall QB1 upside. At running back, Isaiah Pacheco. The Chiefs were already phasing out Kareem Hunt before he got hurt, and Pacheco played a season-high snap percentage in Week 6, and then in the blowout in Week 7, he had a season-high 15 carries. He has also been pretty efficient with over 4.1 yards per carry on the year, and this high-flying offense gives him plenty of red zone opportunities. Wide receiver, we got Alec Ayumanner. He's had at least 5 targets in all but one game, and has played at least 93% of the snaps in each of the last 2 weeks. The Colts allow the second most fantasy points per game to wide receivers, and they allow the third most passing yards per game due to teams playing catch-up most of the game, and there will probably be no Calvin Ridley. He's probably already ruled out by now. Tight end Dalton Schultz. The 49ers are a middle-of-the-pack matchup from a season-long sample size, but since losing Fred Warner in the beginning of Week 6, they have allowed over 11.5 fantasy points per game to tight ends. There's a very small chance of Nico Collins or Christian Kirk playing this week, and Schultz is coming off of his best game since Week 9 of 2023. Now, we'll go through some sleeper starts for you guys that are just down bad, and this 6-team bye week and lots of injuries. A.J. Brown ruled out. Ricky Pearsall ruled out. Just a lot of injuries. Jaden Daniels out. Like I said, 6 teams on bye. Get into sleeper starts. We got Joe Flacco. The only bright spot on this Jets defense is Sauce, and he is ruled out. They have one of the lowest pressure rates, giving Flacco plenty of time to throw all over them. Another old quarterback, Aaron Rodgers. It's revenge time. This is his first time playing the Packers, and he has had 2 4-touchdown games this season, and I figure this will be his 3rd this week. Running back Tyler Algier. In Atlanta's wins this year, he averages 15 touches per game and has 3 touchdowns in those. The Falcons should spank the Dolphins, and Bijan probably won't hardly touch the field in the 4th quarter. Kyle Monangai. The Ravens allow the second most fantasy points per game to running backs, and he practically split the backfield with Swift last week, who is dealing with a groin injury and actually may not play. We got Alec Pierce, Colts wide receiver. He's had 48 or more yards in 4 of his 5 games this season, and he is the deep ball option for Daniel Jones. Last week, he led the league in air yards with 248 and an ADOT of 24.8 yards. Another wide receiver, Troy Franklin. It's shootout time with the Cowboys. He was 5th in the league in air yards last week with 172. He only had 3 catches for 19 yards, so that's crazy on 10 targets. He has been out-snapping Marvin Mims, and he is 4th in the league in red zone targets among wide receivers. I couldn't believe that. Cowboys allow the most fantasy points per game to wide receivers, so expect a big game from him and probably Marvin Mims. Then we got a little tricky one, Colston Loveland. Cole Kmet has been ruled out, so I don't know. Maybe we'll find this is the first time. The Ravens have been absolutely beat up by tight ends all year, and if Lamar Jackson plays, this will be a shootout, and Colston Loveland should be a part of that. Let's get into sits. We got quarterback Mac Jones. No Brock Purdy this week, which means Mac Jones got both the toughest matchups for quarterbacks back to back. This week he gets the Texans, who allow the fewest fantasy points per game to quarterbacks. With 6 teams on bye and a couple starting quarterbacks injured, managers may be inclined to play Mac Jones because of the weapons, but there are much better options out on the waiver. Running back Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, aka Bill. The Cowboys just held him to 2.5 yards per carry, and that's a bad defense. The Chiefs allow the 7th lowest fantasy points per game to running backs, and Jaden Daniels is not playing, so that hurts his efficiency bad. Bill is coming off of back-to-back games of less than 6 fantasy points, and his snap percentage dipped below 50% last week while trailing the Cowboys, which is what they will be doing against the Chiefs. Wide receiver Jalen Waddle. You can add in Tua in here as well. The Falcons allowed the 2nd fewest fantasy points per game to wide receivers, and Waddle is coming off of a terrible 2.5 performance last week. Tua has a league-high 9 interceptions versus zone coverage, and the Falcons play zone coverage at a top 5 rate. Tua and Waddle will have a rough game this week. Do not start them, but you're probably stuck starting Waddle, so good luck. Hopefully he hits a long bomb. Tight end Theo Johnson. At first glance, he looks like a reliable starting tight end. He has scored 4 touchdowns since week 4 and has averaged 13 fantasy points per game in that span. But 2 weeks ago against the Eagles, he was held to 2 catches for 27 yards. And the Eagles allow the 4th fewest fantasy points per game to tight ends. And they will be looking for revenge against the Giants at home, who humiliated them in week 6. Let's get into my favorite defenses. Obvious starters, Patriots versus Browns. Hopefully you listened a couple weeks ago on the waiver wire when I said pick up the Patriots. They play the Bills this week. You don't want to start them, but from then on, you're going to want to start them. I think they were like the number 1 defense last week. But Patriots versus the Browns, Colts versus the Titans, Chiefs versus the Commanders, no Jaden Daniels, and the Bills versus the Panthers. Red Rifle, Bills coming off a bye. Yikes. Less owned teams to start. We got the Texans versus the Niners. Texans have a pretty good defense, and Mac Jones hasn't been playing that great. Bucks versus the Saints. Pretty obvious, but the Saints do play pretty well against the Bucks, but I feel like the Bucks can overwhelm them. Falcons versus the Dolphins. Falcons, sneaky good defense. Dolphins are falling apart. And then the other side of this matchup, 49ers versus the Texans. The Texans looked horrible, and the Niners just held the Falcons to like 10 points. And then a tricky one, Bengals versus the Jets. The Bengals, yikes. But the Jets, even bigger yikes. Highly owned defenses to avoid. We got the Broncos versus the Cowboys. I know they're good, but the Cowboys can put up 40 on anyone. And then we got the Steelers versus the Packers. I do think Aaron Rodgers will have a good game, but I don't necessarily think that means the Steelers defense will have a good game. All right, guys, that's all for the starts and sits. Good luck this week with your fantasy matchups, and thanks for watching.